So I recently finished my first semester at Florida State University as a computer science student, and I really just wanted to go over some of my thoughts on my classes to maybe help someone out there just figure out whether or not they want to go here, and maybe learn a few things about the computer science program at Florida State. So, first off, the first class I want to talk about will be the Introductory Chemistry class, which is CHM 1045, known as General Chemistry, and then obviously this has an accompanying lab with it. So this is a course that is required for computer science students that are looking to get a bachelor's of science in computer science. An interesting thing about Florida State, which I don't know if many other schools do, is they offer multiple degrees that are computer science degrees. They offer a computer science degree, which is a bachelor's of arts, and they also offer a computer science degree, which is a bachelor's of sciences. And to really get into like the intricate, I'll actually dig a little bit more into the details of what that means here soon, but it does have some pretty interesting things with it. So first off, with chemistry, like I was saying, one of those things it fulfills is a normal science requirement at FSU, but also if you're looking to get the BS degree in computer science, then it will start to fill your science requirements for that. No matter what, if you go for the Bachelor's of Sciences as a computer science student, you have to take basically at least 3 science classes at FSU, and they're not like simple science classes at all. They're usually you're going to have to go through chemistry, one set of chemistry, and then 2 set of biologies, or 3 sets of physics. So physics 1, 2, and 3. Or like I said before, chemistry 1 and then biology 1 and biology 2. So either way, you're not going to get past like simple sciences, or you're not going to be able to do just a few simple or one simple class of science if you want to get a BS for computer science at FSU. So that may be one of the first things to consider. So for me in this class, last fall semester of 2021, I really had a difficult time with it because I was not prepared for chemistry at all. I did not take chemistry in high school, and I think that was a big issue for me. I was planning to attempt to go the physics route for my degree, but when I got looking into physics classes, when I finally got into scheduling my classes, all the physics classes were filled, so I could not take the first set of physics, and I was like, well, I don't want to get behind in this department. I'll try chemistry. And what ended up actually happening for me is I ended up having to drop this course. This is the only course that I've dropped at FSU so far, and hopefully it will be the only course I drop the entire time at FSU. But it was also in the late drop window because I really wanted to put effort forward before I decided that there's no way I was going to be able to complete this. But in the end, I just realized that I was not going to be able to pass this class, even though I was putting in a lot of effort, studying more than I do for almost all my other classes, and going to see teaching assistants / like people that would help me outside of class, getting tutoring, and I just still could not keep up with it. Another thing to note here is that what's interesting about taking science classes as opposed to other classes, and I feel like this is probably a general college note more than anything, is that when you have these science teachers, especially, now you could say this turns over into other fields as well, but these science teachers at these universities, I think it's very important to understand that professors at universities are often more concerned with research that they're doing rather than their teaching. And this is not always the case for every professor, but I think the worst of the worst comes in the science department. And for me, as a person who already doesn't do well in science normally, and then having this happen as well, like this be on top of it, where I don't feel like the teacher's necessarily invested in how successful I am. They're really just teaching because they have to on top of doing the research. That doesn't really help. And it kind of felt like that was across the chemistry department because TAs were helpful, but like the main professor, then like you'd get into your lab and you'd see more other teachers, and it just really doesn't feel like, if you're weak in science already like I am, or if even worse, you've never even had like an introductory high school type course for this type of stuff, I would really advise against attempting to do what I did. And last week, my professor was actually Biwoo Ma, so I definitely think he knows his stuff. But the one thing with him that's really the only complaint for me is that he has a bit of an accent, so he was a little bit hard to understand sometimes. So for me especially, who doesn't really have a chemistry background, even a little bit of like an accent can really throw me off because I already don't know what you're talking about. And that was my experience with chemistry. And also, just to cap everything off with chemistry, me dropping that class basically made me realize that I didn't want to do the Bachelor's of Science anymore. I think that the Bachelor's of Arts for Computer Science is plenty sufficient for what I want to do with my life moving forward. So that's where that's the degree I tend to continue on the track for, and am on track for now. And my schedule has been updated for this semester based off that. So here were my other classes. None of these were dropped. All of these went much better than my chemistry class for my first semester at FSU. And the next one to talk about is CIS 3250, which is known as Ethics and Computer Science, and it had an accompanying lab. This class will definitely be much simpler to explain. Everybody has an ethics requirement at FSU, and basically, with this class, it talks about ethics in terms of the computer science realm, programming, just kind of general like tech laws that have been passed. The nice thing about this is it's probably a lot more recent than a lot of other classes where it's like ethics courses overall are just going to talk about like overall, like all encompassing things. This class really taught you a lot of stuff that was more recent in terms of world stuff, because it all has to do with technology, and especially in the computer science world, none of those laws are very old. And then it's also just talking about how generally people should view what is right or wrong. So yeah, the only other thing with this was my only class last semester that was an online only course. I didn't think that was an issue. The only thing I can say is that there really was no one-on-one personal relationship between me and my professor, because really the way he set up the course was done really well. My professor for this course was Brent Gann, and he set it up extremely well. I liked exactly how he did everything, and even his lectures, even though they were recorded and then sent out and you just watch them, honestly, they were really good. And sometimes I thought he was really funny, and he would add in a lot of cool information that wasn't necessary. As for the lab portion of this class, maybe like, how's a lab fit into ethics? Well, the lab with this class is a lab that can fulfill a science requirement, not a science requirement, a lab that can fulfill a speech requirement at FSU. So everybody needs to take one speech course at FSU, and for me, this is where it filled in. I've never had trouble with speeches because I've done a lot of public speaking throughout high school, and that really prepared me pretty well for it. But if I had to say one thing, recently, this second semester, since I've started, I got to go meet one of the communications professors at FSU, and he goes by the name Mark Ziegler, and he teaches an introductory course for speaking that apparently a ton of students take, considering it's just the general class as opposed to being a specific one, so that people can fulfill their speech requirements they need. And just after listening to him speak, I think that his class would have been really fun to take, as opposed to just taking this lab. So, if you can get into either of these courses, I think you'll have a fine time being the lab with computer science ethics. Or if you can get into that introductory speech course with Mark Ziegler in the communications department, I think that would be awesome too, because he seems like a really great professor that's really got his students in tune and on task. Next up, MAC 2311. So this is your first calculus with analytical geometry class in college, and this is required for all computer science majors. But actually, if you get a bachelor's of arts degree, you're done with calculus here. If you go for the bachelor's of science, I think you have to take two, maybe only one. It may be one or two more calculus classes, but it's at least one more. And I just didn't think. Once again, I could have done that. Math is on the other hand from science. Science I struggle with. Math I do not struggle with at all. So I really could have moved on for the next few calculus courses and probably been fine. But it was just what I just really, when I knew halfway through the semester that I wasn't going to be finishing chemistry, I realized that my calculus with analytical geometry course was the last math course that I needed to fill my math requirements at FSU. Not only for my general math requirements, but also for my degree-specific math requirements. And with that being said, it really just made me kind of like pack it in terms of the end, like, oh, I'm not going to need to learn any more math or really gain any of this for the future. Math's a field that I really enjoy learning about, so I didn't like early in the course I got like what would be considered A's on like my first 3 tests, and from there once I knew that I basically had like a guaranteed C in the bag, I kind of just packed it in and was fine getting a B in the course because I was like, this is the last math class I need to do. I'll focus more on my computer science stuff when I really need to, because the one thing that I don't like about math, even though I enjoy it, is just like how much real application time there is to like ingrain all this stuff in your memory. And for me to move from that B to A grade didn't seem worth it when I knew it was my last course I needed. Now, if you're someone that's worried about your GPA in terms of scholarships or anything like that, then this obviously does become a concern. And for you, it definitely makes sense to make sure that you can get the highest grade possible in every class. I am not worried about scholarships at all, so I'm just worried about getting through my classes and getting the grades I need to get through them. I didn't see any reason pushing my grade up from that B I ended up getting to an A was worth the extra time. So halfway through the semester, I kind of chilled out. But one more note, two more notes on this course. Just my instructor was Penelope Kirby. She was very. I thought she was a very good math teacher, but math's kind of a dry subject, so that can kind of make it hard sometimes. Just to be completely honest, but I thought she was really good. Maybe the one thing is like she's not just being frank here. She's not like a young teacher, so I don't know if I feel like some people generally enjoy younger teachers more. So she's not very young, so that could be an issue for some people, but I thought she was fine, and I thought she taught the course very well. But yeah, and then there's one other thing. You have this thing called recitation for a variety of classes at FSU that are really like more like smaller class sizes that really get you learning more directly with people. And we'd have these posters where we would have to actually explain our calculus problems that we did at home and bring them in. Because in calculus, basically what you learn from the beginning of the semester builds on to everything you learn at the end of the semester. I feel like the posters really did help me learn. It's just that I think you could actually, because there was like 12 weeks or so that we had dissertations where we'd have to do these posters, but you only had to do like 5, maybe 6 of them. And I think it actually would be better for, if it's possible for you, to wait until the later weeks to do them, because you will learn better when you do these posters. But the later weeks are a little bit more in-depth, and because they're more in-depth, you'll then have all the material you learned before, along with all the material you learned at the end of the semester, all put together in these posters. And then by the end of the course, you'll have a better understanding of everything. Whereas if you do the posters all early in the course, when you can choose to do that, and then you'll have them done quickly, which I think a lot of students want to get on top of. So that's a good thing. But actually, in terms of how well you learn the content, I think it would be better to push it off. So it's really weighing your options. If you want to get those posters done quickly for the calculus course, that's one thing. But if you can hold off on them and potentially do a few later in the semester, and especially if you've got to take more calculus classes in the future, I think it will actually improve your learning to wait a little bit later into the semester to do all of your posters. Then, my last two classes filled two diversity requirements. So my last two classes were REL 1300, which was Intro to World Religions, and HIS 3464, which was the History of Science. I'm sort of lumping these together because they're very similar in the fact that they were diversity requirements. So one of them filled like a world diversity requirement, while the other one filled like a United States diversity requirement. I'm not even sure which one classified as which or how they did, because I really feel like they both should have filled the world diversity requirement, not just the United States diversity requirement. But if I had to guess, I would say that the world religions class filled the world requirement and the history of science class filled the United States requirement, even though that honestly, it talked about much more than just the United States and like English people specifically, or like white Europeans basically. So with that being said, in my religion intro to world religions class, my teacher was Paul Anthony. I thought he was great. He always had really good feedback for like writing and stuff. And these were both writing courses, which really surprised me because you're talking about subjects that feel like it could just be a lot more just like, okay, here's what we're learning. Okay, now regurgitate the information, which is not as fun. But actually with how both of these like classes were structured, it was amazing in terms of like the actual thoughts that you would be produced through these courses. The only thing with Intro to World Religions that I guess I wasn't sure about going into it is really more that you're exploring like what exactly counts as a religion. And when you really think about it, that's kind of like a difficult thing to classify. And it's interesting, but it's definitely not talking about theology or like the philosophy behind why people would believe a certain religion. It's just talking about much more of like the facts of what it is. So if there was any like retractable thing from it, that would be it. But honestly, still very interesting class. Taught me a lot about different various religions that I didn't know. And I really like talking about that stuff. So that's really interesting. But my favorite class of the semester was History 3464, which was the history of science. This class, I was not sure how I was going to like this class because, like I said, I do not like science. I always enjoy history classes, but I was really worried about talking about science in terms of history. History would really make it like, okay, well, we're just going to end up talking about scientific stuff like we already talk about in other science classes. But no, this really sticks to the fact that this is a history class. And when we're talking about the major breakthroughs of science, most of the class does not rely on like the newest content. We're talking about how ideas develop in this course, and really like specifically like a term we used a lot was paradigm shifts, and how that would affect different how that affects the world, and when people start believing new things versus what they used to believe, and understanding things in a better manner than they used to, and just how that can change over time. And that was really interesting. And when you think about all those types of things that have happened on a large scale throughout history, you really have to go like far, far back in time to really get a good view of all of these. And because most of these topics are just things that we generally understand nowadays, it's not very hard to talk about. And really, it's not until probably like the last eighth of the course, so the final maybe 2 weeks of like the learning of the course you have to do, where it's like you really get into some of the new content that's a little more difficult to explain, with like getting into like Isaac Newton, other things like that. Basically, past him is really where I would say it starts to get a little bit more difficult for a few things and concepts to actually be able to understand, if you're not a science person like I am. But even still, my teacher did a wonderful job explaining it, and he was great. The way he teaches his class and then presents his lectures is amazing, and it was one of my favorite courses ever. And his name was J. Edgar Shockley. He just goes by his first initial, so that's not like Jay. It's J. Period Edgar Shockley, and that he was great, and I was really surprised with how that course went because I needed to fill that diversity requirement, and I saw this class and it was like, this sounds interesting, but I was really worried about it going into it. Like, man, I'm scared I am really not going to enjoy this class. I know I do not like science, but the way he taught it really stuck to like the history perspective of it, kept things as simple as he possibly could, and really just really taught me a lot of stuff that I didn't know and was really happy that I had learned in the end. So with all that being said, that was my experience with my first semester at Florida State University as a computer science student. So I hope you enjoyed, provided you some insight into the experience at FSU, and maybe it'll convince you to go there and take some of these classes. See ya.